Good evening. Hello and welcome to Madison on Track 2045. This is our kickoff public meeting, and we are very excited to have you here in the audience, and those of you watching from home, welcome. We are going to have an interesting evening tonight, and I'd like to introduce our consultants, Orion Planning and Design, and I'm going to turn it over to Allison to kick us off.
Thanks, Mary Beth, and thank you all for joining us on this extremely rainy evening. Thanks for coming out. We are scoped to end no later than 7 o'clock tonight, so being respectful of your time, we'll have you in and out and hope to give you the lay of the land as we begin this process to update Madison's comprehensive plan. I should grab my handy-dandy clicker. So, as Mary Beth said, my name is Allison Mauk. I do not hail from the south. I hail from Missoula, Montana, which is a little ways from here. But I am a partner with Orion Planning and Design, and I'm joined by 4 of my colleagues this evening and this week while we're on site in Madison. Carol Ray, formerly Huntsvillian, now lives in Jacksonville, Florida. Bob Barber, Hernando, Mississippi, Memphis area. Oliver Seabolt in the back from St. Simon's Island, Georgia. And Bert Kirkendall, who was hiding over here, who's from Chattanooga, right up the road. So you will hopefully get to know the 5 of us quite well over the coming months and, frankly, a year plus as we work with you to update the comprehensive plan. Our team, you can see on the screen, we are a legitimate firm. If you care to visit our website, you can see some of the other work we've done across the country. We work almost of our work is with communities such as yourselves, cities, towns, county governments, on comprehensive planning efforts, master plans, code, development code updates. We do a little bit of private development, but this is really our passion, and this is what we love to do, working in communities to look at the future and really think through next steps in terms of growth and development and how to plan for the next 15 to 20 years for Madison. So our purpose tonight is for you to get comfortable and meet us, understand a little bit about the process we're embarking upon, what the next few months look like, and what the next 12 to 14 months, 12 to 16 months hopefully end up in an updated comprehensive plan. We're going to each speak a little bit to some initial observations that we've made in the last couple of days, talk a little bit about what we've heard from the stakeholder groups we have engaged so far, and that will continue through tomorrow as well, and give you some baseline existing conditions. Again, we are just starting this process. This is really square one for us, so there are a lot of unknowns. There are a lot of questions unanswered, and that's one of the reasons that you all are sitting here tonight. We are a blank slate, and we really want to hear from you, not only tonight, but throughout this plan update, kind of what you see as assets, opportunities, goals, your vision as a community for the future of Madison. And then we'll kind of wrap up with some next steps, short-term and long-term, so you kind of know what's coming down the road and opportunities for future engagement. If it's not already obvious, there's going to be a brief presentation, but we're going to try and keep it pretty brief because we do have an interactive exercise that will kind of break in the middle of our time together tonight for. It's going to be an exercise that you will use your phones for. For many of you who've probably participated in these activities before, we like to use dots as planners. There's lots of dot exercises. I promise you that will come the next time we see you. But for tonight, we're going to rely on our phones and technology that will allow folks joining us from home to also participate and sort of see some of the initial inputs that you'll provide us and that they'll provide us in real time on a map and talk through some of those scenarios. So hopefully it'll all work. We've tested it, and but technology is anything but fluid these days. I'd be remiss if I didn't introduce our sub-consultants that make up our comprehensive team in this effort. For those of you we've engaged with so far this week, hopefully you have been brought up to speed and that this plan will not just be about visioning and future land use, but we also have a pretty strong market analysis component where we will be looking at existing housing and retail and commercial trends to help us inform the future land use mapping. That is a core part of the comprehensive plan. So Tischler Bice is our partner that will be focused on that market analysis, and they will be here with us throughout the process as well. We have Skipper Consulting, who's going to be helping update traffic counts and looking at some of the mobility and transportation issues that we know are so important for Madison. And then the Matheny Burns Group is a partner of ours that will be helping with the mapping, some of the analysis. And so while the 5 of us will be the faces that you see most frequently, we want you to know we have a pretty deep bench of professionals who do this on a daily basis and will be helping the city update the plan. So how many of you have been through a past planning effort like this? Okay, I figured there were a few seasoned professionals in the audience. So you all know that it's important to have a comprehensive plan. It's important to identify, that cohesive vision for our community's future, and that's going to be a primary objective of ours. Again, why we want to engage you on the front end and through the process. Obviously, Madison is growing. There's been a lot of pressure in the last 10 to 12 years since the previous growth plan was adopted in 2010. And so we want to understand kind of what the conditions, how the conditions have shifted. We are coming out of, hopefully, fingers crossed, a very interesting 2.5-year, 3-year period that will certainly influence some of the conversations and dynamics when it comes to land use. And that's just part of why we want to have a comprehensive plan that's current, that is not static, that can be looked at as a snapshot in time, and one that is intended to provide some pretty clear direction and goal setting, but is also not meant to be unchangeable. Because if you had had a plan that was adopted in 2015, it's likely that no one would have considered everything that has happened in the last 36 months. It would require revisitation. So it's important to always remember that these plans, while they are visionary and are definitely intended to be implementable, are not finite. They're intended to be a baseline and a benchmark for you to revisit as times change. So those changes, as we know them, and as we have talked to our stakeholder groups thus far this week, are really focused on changing conditions related to growth. What are your infrastructure needs? What are your service delivery needs? What changes are impacting public service, utility, safety? How has economic growth shifted over the last decade? What are some of the environmental considerations with changes to weather and climate and all that good stuff that factor into land use policy and decision making? All of that factors into components of the plan that we will be looking at through this process, and that those of you who have been part of previous updates already know well. Our roadmap for the next, say, 12 to 16 months, because it always shifts. We have I like to call them the A goals, the B goals, and the C goals. The A goal is a year. The C goal is, and I hope that we're considering a planning document by the first quarter of 2023. But we've got a lot to accomplish in a relatively short period of time. So we are starting out with discovery, and that's what this visit is really intended to do. For us to learn from you, for us to learn from time spent in Madison. We had a great tour yesterday morning where those of us that haven't lived here got a sense for the very interesting makeup of Madison as a city, figuring out the boundary, which, as we heard from a number of folks, is still unclear to people who've lived here their entire life. So it's, getting to know you as a community and understand where we might start to investigate a little bit deeper into some of these issues and opportunities we'll talk about tonight. So that's step one. We'll get into a little bit about what comes next in this step towards the end of the night. But we will be producing a community profile that will help provide a baseline for the plan's development. That's slated for late this spring. From there, we'll be returning here for some pretty intensive visioning exercises with you all and hopefully more members of the public as they become familiar with this process. And that'll be the real meat and bones of the plan. That'll be when we start to draft components. Draft the framework. This fall, we'll be focused on the actual content drafting of the plan, and as I mentioned, seek to have a complete draft by first quarter of next year for formal consideration. So that's kind of our roadmap for you to know. It can shift, as roads do. So this week, and I know at least a handful of you I've already seen in our stakeholder group meetings, so you're well aware of what we intended to accomplish during this first visit. We will have engaged a total of 14 individual stakeholder groups. And those stakeholder groups have been organized by topic. And the topics are actually so that you can get a sense. And now I'm wondering if I miscounted, so don't quote me on that. But they're on that poster in the back of the room, and I'll explain a little bit more about what that's about. But if you have interest, those are kind of how we divided out our conversations. And the intent there was not to limit conversation to just mobility or just the environment, because all of these things overlap. But it was really to give folks a launch pad to talk about topics that they are experts on. If you weren't part of a stakeholder group, that is why you're here tonight. Stakeholder groups were intended to be a very targeted audience that would help us connect with other interested parties, professionals, constituents that need to be engaged in this process. So we will complete those meetings tomorrow. We'll also be kicking off with our Plan Advisory Committee tomorrow evening. As I said, we did a site visit. We've already been, as a team, reviewing all of the previous planning documents and codes that Madison has previously adopted, and getting to know some of the existing conditions and trends that are going to impact our studies as we move forward. So I'm going to stop talking here for a moment and pass the baton to Carol. We're just going to give you, again, a brief snapshot of some of those existing conditions and trends for consideration tonight, and then go into the exercise.
Thank you, Allison. And I'm going to kick us off by talking about the environment. You can see the topics up here. And this is, as she said, a very high-level overview of what we've heard, what we've observed since we started working on the project just recently. So the environment, in discussing this with our stakeholder group, the primary environmental elements that we have on our radar right now are the creeks, the ponds, the floodplains, the wetlands around Madison, within Madison. The dominant water features are the creeks and the ponds, and most of those ponds are man-made ponds used to retain stormwater. But there are floodplains and wetlands associated with the creeks that we're also interested with. This map to my right shows the floodplains and the wetlands. It is the environmental map, so it's a good one to come and study if you're interested in that. We're also looking at tree coverage, but just looking quickly, and I have a couple slides here in a minute. They're going to illustrate some of these points, but most of your trees are associated with those creeks. But some are also in the protected Rainbow Mountain area, and many of your wetlands have trees associated with them as well. But there aren't as many trees in the urban areas. When we go into some cities, it's hard to see the houses on aerials because there's so many trees if those aerials were shot during the summer. So we're going to talk a little bit about why trees are important. Surface water quality, we learned, is an interjurisdictional issue, especially as related to the Indian Creek and Limestone Creeks, because these are creeks that as shown on this map, you can tell by these blue lines to the far left of the map and the far right of the map that rise and fall outside of Madison, but Madison is impacted by that in terms of its Phase 2 stormwater controls and its TMDLs, which is a fancy term, but it talks about mainly, I believe what I heard was it's mainly sedimentation issues related to erosion and land development. So again, environmental challenges, sedimentation, fecal coliform, mostly related to E. coli. That comes from animals in agriculture. It can come from concentrated wildlife areas, but in Madison's case, it's probably mostly agriculture from outside the city and leaking septic tanks. Habitat loss, lack of shade. That's a tree issue, and as we know in the South, shade is a premium. That's where we all fight for the parking space. It's going to become more so if climate continues to get warmer. The loss of open space is a concern that was expressed to us by a number of stakeholders. And there's a question about invasive species. So far, we haven't heard any major issues on that, but we are going to continue to investigate and also look at endangered species. So tree coverage, these three small graphics illustrate that. In the center, you can tell, you can pick out the creeks. You can pick out the creeks on some of these maps just by looking for the dark green swatches of trees as they follow those creeks. On the left is a subdivision in Madison where street trees were planted in conjunction with the housing development. On the right is a subdivision that was put in without street trees. You can begin to see the differences and the differences it can make. And if you're a real estate professional, how many of you are real estate professionals? Trees are dollars in real estate in many places. The houses in areas that have lots of trees tend to sell better. Stormwater ponds. This is what it looks like if you look on the aerial, and these came from aerials, so I encourage you to go and take a look. But the one on the left of the screen is a 4-pond series. 2 of those ponds drain in one direction, 2 drain in the other direction. And the center pond is related to the high school, the Clemens High School. I'm forgetting the proper name. James Clemens. I kept wanting to say Samuel Clemens, and I knew that wasn't right. And then on the right, that is, you may not be able to see it very well, but that is a picture of a retention pond where the water does not stand constantly. And those are also built in Madison to help control stormwater. Open space. This is actually a photo taken in Madison. This is on the west side of Madison. This is disappearing. And some of what you see on the west side that looks like this today already has entitlement to be developed. So that is a concern. And the wetlands, I'm sorry. These are 2 shots of wetlands. It's difficult, again, in the light as I'm looking at them on the screen for you to pick out. But the wetlands are tree covered for the most part. There's usually some water bodies associated with those. I understand there's some good fishing in some of them. These are natural areas, and much more of Madison used to look like this than looks like this today. A lot of it has been filled in, sometimes years and years ago. So now I'm going to turn it over to Allison for land use.
I forgot to assign these slides, so I guess it's me. As I mentioned earlier, and I'll be quite brief here, we're looking at some very interesting jurisdictional dynamics in Madison. The maps that I'm going to show on the screen are over here to the right of the room. And when we break to do the exercise, please, I saw a number of you looking at them. They're existing land use, future land use, and the existing zoning, all of which factor into our task, which is to evaluate and create a baseline in terms of future build-out if everything were to stay the same based on these maps in this direction. From there, and part of that next phase that we'll be engaging you this summer in, we want to understand a little bit about what if we changed the scenario? What if we thought about development differently from both ends of the spectrum? and where do we want to land based on carrying capacity, infrastructure needs, you know, your overall vision for how Madison can and should develop, given the relatively limited land that is left to annex that hasn't already been annexed by the city of Huntsville. We know you're landlocked. That's a challenge. We know you are split by 2 counties that have different restrictions, requirements in terms of not annexation, but extraterritorial planning jurisdictions and how you navigate that. It's a very interesting situation. It is very complex. It's going to be a focal point of our teams as we move forward through the future land use mapping process and our scenario planning this summer. So all that to say, you have a very interesting baseline to start from when it comes to existing land use, your existing zoning code, and kind of how that's going to inform this plan. Mobility, Bert. We know how important this one is.
Council. Yeah, so mobility has come up a lot in our stakeholder meetings so far, and it's not unlike other growing areas. It's difficult for transportation to keep up with fast-growing development. And so we're going to take a really close look at that, and it's really crucial in the comp planning process that transportation planning goes alongside with land planning. They're integral, they're tied together closely, and so we're going to really take a deep dive in that. I want to show this first, that we're going to be doing traffic counts to get up-to-date traffic information and using that to update the travel demand model. And what the travel demand model does is it models traffic based on land use. And so that will work closely with what Allison was just talking about, which is the land planning. So looking at different land planning scenarios, what is the effect of those on the transportation system? But when you think about transportation, you think about streets. But what are streets? Are streets conduits for vehicles and transportation, or are they the public spaces that define our cities and towns? And the answer is complex. The answer is both, right? They are conduits for transportation, but also it is the front door of every building in town. And it's the place that visitors see. It's the place that you experience as a resident. And so we really want to emphasize the complete street concept of streets that really takes both of those into account, that that looks at streets as being places for all users, people driving, also people walking, biking, looking at goods, transport, at freight, because really to be a balanced, well-balanced town, to be a walkable, livable town, you've got to look at all of those modes of transportation. So the top right screen, that is, those are the towns in Alabama and the surrounding states that have complete streets policies. And that's something that we really encourage places to do, is to adopt a policy that basically says when a new street is built, when a street is rebuilt, that all the users are taken into account in those streets. The bottom graphic, that's the Dangerous by Design report put out by the Complete Streets Coalition. And it's hard to see from where you are, but it basically ranks each state as far as endangerment to pedestrians, and Florida's #1 in being the most dangerous place to walk. Alabama's #2. So we've got a lot of work to do. I'm from Mississippi, which is 3, I think. I live in Tennessee, which is in there. So it's a southern thing. Our cities were built kind of in the age of cars. We didn't really think about people walking again, but now we're thinking about those things. So how do we retrofit streets? This is an example of University Boulevard in Tuscaloosa. It's the same number of lanes. It moves the same number of cars, but it also incorporates bike lanes. It incorporates a side path for people walking. And it looks better. It's more inviting into campus. So this is either your favorite street or the street you hate the most, depending on your allegiances. So we're going to look at both LOSs. We hear a lot about LOS as far as level of service, and that's about traffic capacity. And that TDM analysis is really going to look at that. We're also going to look at level of stress. It's basically saying how inviting is this street to walk on, to bike on. So we really want to have a balanced approach to that. And people are very active in Madison walking and biking. This is the Strava Heat Map, which you can look at. If you go to, Strava is the app that you use to log your run, your walk, your bike trip. So this is a heat map of where people are walking and biking a lot. So you see a lot of activity on the squiggly greenways going up and down. Just outside of town, a lot is happening on the Indian Creek Greenway, around the research park, and within the neighborhoods. But there are significant gaps in this. And what we've heard a lot from people so far is that they can walk in their neighborhood, but they can't connect from their neighborhood to a greenway. They've got to get in their car to drive to a greenway to walk. But a lot of great things have been happening, a lot of greenway development, a lot of multi-use path development, still a lot of gaps to connect, and the city is really aware of that and working on that. Walkability, another great website is Walk Score. So this is the, missing a graphic. So the Walk Score of Madison is 17, that's out of 100. So, and the tagline for that is, Madison is a car-dependent city. That's what it says when you type it in. The hotspots there are the more walkable places, and it's rating walkability not just by what facilities are there, but are there things to walk to. So the heart of town there, which is downtown, Sullivan Street, the City Hall area, rank higher because there are things to walk to. There are parks, there are businesses to walk to. Really outside those areas, not a lot of walkability. 72 shows up as walkable. Of course, who likes to walk on 72, right? But there's potential there for walk. There's so many uses there. There's housing, there are apartments, there's a lot of retail, so there's potential walkability there. Connectivity is really important. The city's looking at connecting streets. This can also go to connecting greenways, connecting neighborhoods together with really small pieces of greenway. Connectivity is crucial because it gives people more options to move about the city, taking heat off these primary collectors and arterials. It's great for emergency responders. It's great for backup if streets are closed, and for emergency access. And some cities have really focused on that. That's a picture of, or graphic of, the Hilton Head side path, multi-use path system. You can bike anywhere in town there. And we kind of think of that as, yeah, that's a great place to go vacation. I can hop on a bike and go somewhere, but that can happen. And southern cities are doing this, and a lot of it's happening through city projects and also through cities requiring developers to build their piece of greenway that connects to the system and builds up over time. And really focusing on safety too. So speed's crucial. I know speeding in neighborhoods is a problem. And that graph just shows what happens to a pedestrian if they get hit by a car. Going 45 miles an hour, you've got a 10% chance of survival. If the car is going about 15, 16 miles an hour, it's a 90% chance of survival. So getting speeds down, controlling illegal speeding. The police can't be there with a radar gun on every street, but there are ways to engineer speed reduction on neighborhood streets and on other streets. And really focusing where it's really crucial around schools. That's the 10-minute walk shed of Bob Jones School. So it's a big area. That's basically, if you are in that area, you can walk to school, but is it a safe walk? Are there safe crossings? Intersections are crucial too. Intersections are important for a level of service with vehicles, like adding turn lanes, are also important for level of stress, because when you add a turn lane, it's a much further crossing for a pedestrian. So taking a balanced look at those intersections. So I'm going to pass it to Bob.
Yes. So as we come to nearer the conclusion of the discovery visit, we rightfully want to briefly cover some demographics and market trends for Madison, which are influencing all of this. The growth of the city over time, the economic development opportunities, all of that is influenced by the demographics and the dynamics at work within the population of Madison and how it will play out over time. You've heard the phrase demographics is destiny. So we can really objectively study that and understand the trends that will occur in Madison over time and how that will influence growth and development for you to take into consideration. So just to cut, this will be a number of statistics here, and we're just getting into it, but there are several very interesting elements to Madison that have popped out. They show up in the conversations we've had with the focus groups, and they will certainly influence you over time as you go forward. So you won't be able to read, I'm sure, from where you are. I'll point out some of those key elements as we go along. First of all, that pops out on this infographic here, the level of education in Madison is off the charts. 60% of the population is bachelor's degree or higher. And of course, that is directly related to the kinds of employment opportunities that are nearby with the arsenal and with the technology and Space Center and so forth. The population has grown over time. You all have experienced that. We hear about the growth over and over and over. We see it. The city is on a trajectory to build out. Meaning, vacant spaces are being absorbed quickly. There are still vacant spaces, but it is growing over time. The household size in Madison is a little bit higher than the region. It's about 2.7 persons per household, as opposed to, if we combine Limestone and Madison counties, it's about 2.4. You might think that doesn't amount to much, but a larger household size and the number of households in Madison equals 6,000 additional people in Madison for the same amount of households in Madison County. So interesting thing to look at, and of course we know partially that is driven by schools because people come for schools, or I should say a lot of people come for schools. And we learned of another interesting dynamic associated with that is that when families with school-age children move to town, oftentimes parents or other relatives that come with them or come behind them to be near grandchildren. And so we heard that, and if you look at this graphic here, I'm not going to turn my back to you. I'll try to describe it. This is a great presentation setup, by the way, because I can look at you and I can see this. If you look at this, the dark blue line is these are age cohorts. They go 5-year increments. The young people are on the bottom. The older folks age out on the top. So the blue bar is 2010. That's how many people were in that age cohort a decade ago. The dark green bar is 2021. It's an estimate, but it's a 2021. Now, that's how it's changed over the decade. And so I'll point you to this bulge right here. You will see, let me do it this way, this bulge right here. So this would seemingly indicate that group of people with school-age children moving into the community to access, in all likelihood, the quality of the school system, which is rated very, very high. There are more people in that age cohort here today, substantially more than there were a decade ago. So we can look at that and we can think about projecting that out over time and what are the impacts on the community. Associated with that is older folks retiring, getting on up in years. You will see more of those folks, except for this cohort right here. In general, there's a higher level of aging. Of course, we know the population is aging in general, but I think it also reflects this dynamic of older folks sort of following their their families. So it's a very interesting situation. It impacts housing markets. It impacts housing mix. It impacts all kinds of things, the types of goods and services that are offered in Madison, and so we're really looking forward to getting into that. And you already know it because you converse about it, and you intuitively sense this dynamic at play in Madison. So just as a couple of more pieces here, if we combine limestone in Madison County, we'll get just under 500,000, 500,000 people. Madison is a tenth of that. It's about 10%, roughly 50,000 people. So 10% of the regional population. Now, associated with the we'll get into more detail as we move along and understand what those trends mean. Also associated with the population, we will conduct a full market assessment. Just exceedingly few highlights are shown here. May not be able to read it, but we look at employment distribution, and this cohort of employment distribution is labeled professional, scientific, and technical services, 20%. So all the engineers and mathematicians and the people associated with science and technology are in Madison to a large degree. Also, related to the military, you'll see out here on the end, this is public administration. Each one of these, by the way, is representative of limestone, Madison County, or limestone and Madison combined. Madison itself is in red as you look at the chart, and you'll be able to see this information in more detail later. But that relates directly to income and what is the wealth factor in Madison. Madison is a wealthy community, and it pops right off the chart. This is household incomes. Again, Madison is the red bar. So when you compare Madison to limestone, Madison County, and the two combined, you get the bulk of the wealth. This is $250,000 here, $500,000, $300,000. I can't read the slide. $500,000 to $1 million right in this cohort here. And this cohort is even larger. It's a huge wealth distribution. This puts it on a graph. You'll see the wealth bulge right here in Madison. And then finally, just a quick comparison of household net worth as is accounted for by the U.S. Census. Madison's household net worth is far and away, is almost double anywhere around. So all this impact, the demographics, the nature of the economy, how people are employed, and how much wealth is at your disposal, obviously you already know, impacts prospects for the future, which we will assess. And it will all feed into what we call a build-out model. We can take existing conditions in terms of land use and zoning and pose the scenario, as Allison has already said. What does it mean if you grow slow, grow medium, grow fast? What does it mean if you build out as you are currently planned? What are the implications of that? Do you like the implications? Do we need to shift them? How do we plan for the future? What are the impacts on streets, roads, land use, et cetera? That's the assessment portion. So, and you'll get a shot at detailed study of that as we move through the process.
Thank you. Okay, so this is the point where we stop talking at you for a little bit and look to you for guidance. Hopefully, everybody in here have a smartphone with them. And anybody does not have a smartphone with you? Okay. All right. So you'll see around the room, we've got QR codes posted. This might be a little far. If it is, we're going to break here in just a minute so you can walk around, take a look at the maps, interact with our team members, ask us questions. If anybody has trouble with this application, we're here to kind of help walk you through it. But our goal tonight, we've gone through very high-level data, preliminary data. As Bob mentioned, we're going to be digging much deeper into that. But in thinking high level about future growth and land use in Madison, where we want to start is to hear from you what parts of Madison, what components, what areas, what individual elements are assets of this community. They can be places, they can be spaces, they can be parks, they can be corridors, they can be a greenway. I mean, the sky's the limit. We're not limiting an asset to something of financial value, but what do you personally value as a resident here that you would want to see retained? And then we want to look at opportunities, because we don't like to think negatively about constraints or, some of the things that might require some improvements. But where do you see opportunity to do something better, to improve upon an existing situation that, for whatever reason, just isn't working for the city? So we've got, if you use the QR code, what it will bring up is a mapping application, and it's very simple. It's going to have 3 prompts. You should get something that looks like this on your phone screen. And the first question is going to be, it's a drop-down menu, and you'll select whether you want to locate an asset or an opportunity. Then you'll have, let's see if I can. There will be a place where you can type in a little bit more context and information for us. So please identify what that asset or opportunity is. I think there's a word limit, but you can give us enough information to clarify what you mean when you drop the pin. And then you're going to go to the map, which I told Jason not to bring up the map, but now I'm. Can we show the map? Got it on a separate screen. Yep. Don't go there. Okay. So when you drop the pin, are we able to zoom out to see the whole sheet, the whole website, or is this just the map? Okay. Anybody have it pulled up on their phone that can confirm what you're looking? Okay, great. All right, we won't belabor that point. So once you have selected an asset or opportunity, given us a little context, you're literally going to click on the map, and it's going to drop a pin. If it's an asset, it'll be green. If it's an opportunity, it's going to be yellow. And you're already seeing real-time these pin populations or pin locations populate. So because there's no limit in terms of how many assets or opportunities you can share with us tonight, folks at home will have the same ability to do this, and so they'll hopefully be populating as well. Just a note, this is going to remain up on our project website for about the next 2 weeks. So if you have additional input, there's plenty of time. Tonight is not the only time slot you get to interact with the map. But we're going to break for about 10 minutes because sometimes I find it hard to scroll around on my phone on a little map. So we'll break. Please come engage with us, take a look at the maps, then we'll reconvene and we'll look at all of the inputs and kind of where we're seeing some similarities and some differences. So, yes, yep, come find one of us. All right, everybody, I'm just going to give you a 2-minute warning, and then if we can sit back down. Okay, so as you can see, in fact, I'll click out of this here. Well, sorry to be turning my back on you a little bit, but okay. It's got a mind of its own there. So these are the preliminary outputs. It will, oh, okay. Great, thanks, Bob. So all of this information, what we're going to get is a report out in a spreadsheet that'll help us view this in a little bit more manageable fashion. But hopefully over the course of the next couple weeks, we'll continue to see this map populate. We'll continue to see some of the areas of convergence and the areas of digression. So Bob's just going to click around, and his initial observation, as you all were inputting, was that the assets are certainly outweighing the opportunities right now, which obviously we want to know, and we're getting a sense for what the community feels is most important and of high value. So I would expect to see, I lost my clicker here, the schools, parks, recreation, those amenities really rising to the level, and hopefully the information that you've provided and will continue to provide will give us some sense of, you know, where specific areas are kind of prioritized, or potential connections can be prioritized moving forward. Bob, are you coming back? So I was able to or if you click on one and then you press the little arrow. Yep. Yep. Yes. Yeah. So, and this is going to be, so it'll be posted, as I mentioned, on our website, and as you're interacting with the map, you will be able to see all of this as well. So you can go into this information on the map in that application, click on any of the data points, and see what your neighbors and fellow residents have inputted. And then we'll also be summarizing. Yes, sir? How long are we going to keep this up? I believe we're 2 weeks. Yep. So we'll and I guess this is a great segue. If you signed in this evening and you provided us your email, you'll be getting an email from me in the next couple of days with this link, and, you know, just to follow up. And we'll have a firm date in terms of when that that map's going to shut down. So let's see what else. Connect Gooch Lane with sidewalk, and you connect all the neighborhoods to Hughes Road, schools, and businesses. Great. Okay, was that an opportunity, Bob? Okay. Yes. Tons of Greenway. Opportunity, lower class size. I think that was in relation to perhaps a new school construction, underused office park. Okay, that's down in the southeast. Commercial development, and that would be along county line there. Okay. So these are great. These are good inputs, and thank you for the comments and context, because sometimes we get pins without any context, and that makes our job a lot harder, so thank you for that. But our hope is that, and as Bob mentioned, the focus along some of those greenways and greenway connections reinforces what we heard from a number of the stakeholder groups in terms of their importance. But having you identify some of those connection points and specific areas that are of focus and value to you will be helpful to us as we start to look for future connectivity, as Bert was mentioning, and thinking through the type of land use and development that should occur along those greenways and path connections. Great, more greenway. Let's find something that's not a greenway. Nope, still greenway. What about, let's see, bulk road, narrow, but one version plan shows a future multi-use path along this stretch that would really open up this area to bike and foot traffic. Great, I think we drove along bulk yesterday, so is it, I'm not pronouncing that, Balch, okay. Maintain city stadium, okay, great. Wonderful. All right. So, thank you for that. Thank you for giving us some initial feedback. I'm glad the application worked. For those of you at home, I hope you keep submitting. And those of you here, you can all go to dinner now and think about your assets and opportunities through the evening. I think we're ready to take the map down and go back to the presentation. Thank you. All right, so real quick, what happens next? As I alluded to earlier in the presentation, we'll be taking all of this feedback received from you all this week, from our stakeholder groups, summarizing it, and it will be provided to you on the project website, so you can take a look at what was said in the various stakeholder conversations and a summary of the outputs from that mapping exercise. You'll have it in the next few weeks, and we'll make sure to notify you, but I'll have the website link up here if you haven't already visited. And it's pretty easy, MadisonOnTrack2045.com. So use that as your primary tool in terms of continued connection with us. End of spring, we'll have a community profile looking at these baseline conditions and kind of setting the stage for our next phase. There will be a comprehensive community survey that comes out of these conversations. We're really using these inputs to help us hone our questions to you and the broader public. So we're not just asking unuseful generalized questions like, do you like more parks, or would you like to see more houses? But winnowing or focusing our lens a little finer so we get really good feedback from you all and the public, and will help us kind of frame out the next stage of this planning process. So again, if you're on our contact list, you'll be notified when that is released. And then the community visioning charrettes, we will be looking towards this summer. I think we have not set dates yet. They will be on our website as soon as we do. You will have plenty of advance notice. You will be notified. But we're thinking around July, I think, is what we're targeting. But there will be opportunity through the survey and through this mapping application in between now and then to continue to provide us input. So, in addition to the map, the project website is going to be a great tool. The community survey, I've already kind of covered that. Yep, and I think that, Hold on. Well, I thought I had another slide in there. Maybe it disappeared. So real quick, on the website, when you visit it, on the landing page, you're going to have two opportunities to connect with us. One is at any point throughout this process, if you have a comment, a question, random feedback, a thought in the middle of the night that you would like to share, you can enter it online. It will populate straight to us. What it will not provide is your email address, because you might have a thought, but you don't want to be on the email list and get constant communication from us. Totally fine. But know that that is an avenue that you can use at any time to provide us feedback. If you would like to receive mailings from us and didn't sign up tonight because you're thinking about it and whether or not you want to hear from me on a weekly basis, you can get on the website and sign up for that list voluntarily. So know that those two avenues are at your disposal, and please share that information with your friends and colleagues so that they know how to connect with us as well. There's the website information. It is 6:45. We technically have 15 more minutes. I do understand if you're hungry, but I'd welcome questions. Oh, thank you. Okay, yes. I had mentioned earlier, so before you leave, there's two boards in the back of the room. There's pens and sticky notes on the table. And we just wanted to open it up to you, those of you who were part of our stakeholder groups or those of you who weren't, knowing some of the topics we're covering. You'll, again, see them all up on the wall. If there's anything we need to really think about as we start this process that is important to you, that you're aware of, that we should be looking at, jot it down, let us know. Similarly, if there's anything that you would like to see go unchanged in this community, that's also important for us to know. And so the board to the left of Mary Beth is an opportunity for you to share some of that feedback with us as well. That will all go into the summary information that we take away from this week. And then finally, Carol reminded me, I saw a number of you taking pictures of the slides. This will be posted online as well, so you'll have an opportunity to look at some of those graphs and charts a little more closely. But yes, I'll open it up to questions, and otherwise we can call it an evening and go eat dinner. Yes, sir. Yes, so this gentleman's question was whether the Land Trust of North Alabama is involved. They are a stakeholder. We actually met with them this morning. They were part of our Parks, Recreation, and Open Space stakeholder group, so they are definitely part of the conversation. Oh, yes, and part of the environmental group. Yep. So, anybody else? Okay. Question was Wheeler Wildlife Refuge. Answer is no. However, part of this process is, involve them in providing us feedback. Absolutely. So, Great. Well, thank you again for being here tonight. You have our contact information. We look forward to working with you in the coming year. Appreciate it.